Okay, so let's begin. The topic that I suggested was divide and conquer, good and evil. That's maybe a bit misleading. I'm not sure how accurate and appropriate the idea is, but as we go along and explain, I think the idea at least will become clearer. This week's portion is the portion of Korach. Very briefly, what is the portion about, at the beginning at least? Numbers chapter 16, Korach leads a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. Now, Korach is considered to be wicked, and it seems like an odd thing to name the portion of the Torah after somebody who is wicked. So there must be a deeper message. What's even more, let's say, disconcerting is that this is the Shabbat, and it's almost always the Shabbat before the Yahrzeit of the Rebbe. And you would think that the Shabbat, which essentially gives the strength, the power, the inspiration for the entire following week, would not be named after, for an auspicious occasion like this, not to be named after somebody who is wicked. But maybe we'll get back to that a little bit later. Briefly, what is the story, the Parsha, about? Korach challenges Moshe's leadership, not the leadership itself, but the reason for him being the leader. What Korach says essentially is that everybody is equal. So what gives you the right to be the leader of the Jewish nation? More than that, Moses gave the kohuna, the priesthood, to Aaron, who was Moshe's brother. Now, it was done by God's commandment, but it seems like it's a family business. So what Korach is saying, what is this? What are you doing? Everybody is equal, and here you are taking all the important positions for your family. Verse 3 reads like this. Korach says, "You take too much upon yourselves. After all, the entire community, all of them, are holy, and God is in their midst. Why do you raise yourselves actually, above God's assembly?" So, in other words, Korach has some valid points. He has some good intentions, and we can learn a lot from that. Obviously, he was also a very good speaker, orator, because the 250 important people, leaders of tribes from the Jewish nation, who joined the rebellion. In any case, what is the next step? They offer ketoret, which is incense. And that's a part of the service of God that's left for the priests. They being not priests, not being Kohanim, they had no business offering the ketoret. And as a result, the final line is that the earth, after this incident, the earth opens up. Korach and his followers are all swallowed alive. As a side note, interesting side note, Bnei Korach, Korach's sons, did not join the rebellion, and they actually authored several of the Psalms that are included in the book of Psalms. So his influence may have been very wide, but not exclusive, not all inclusive, even to his own family. Okay, so now we see that if Korach did have good intentions, what went wrong? What went wrong that he instituted this rebellion, and what went wrong that God actually swallowed them into the earth alive? So, of course, almost all the commentators ask, and also most of the commentators say it was a matter of jealousy. Now, very often not only we, anybody can do things that out of jealousy. We try to give a legitimate backing, a legitimate reason, but behind it stands jealousy. Jealousy, of course, can be very, very destructive. But what I would like to do in the next few minutes is look at a different take on this whole episode and see what the Hasidic approach is to this uprising. And in order to do so, we'll focus on one word in the beginning of this week's portion. Verses 1 and 2 read like this. Korach, the son of Yitzhar, son of Kahat, son of Levi, took, together with Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliav and On Peled, descendants of Reuben, they confronted Moses together with 250 men from the Israelites, etc., etc., etc. Now, I think it got a little bit lost in there, but look at the word took. It says like this, Korach, the son of so-and-so, took, together with so-and-so and so-and-so, the descendants of Reuben. They confronted Moses and so on. What's this word took doing here? What did they take? Where did this come from? It seems like it's out of place. But if we look at the Hebrew, the order is reversed. The parasha begins, Vayikach Korach. Vayikach comes from the word lekachat, it means to take. So that Korach took. Now, Rashi explains that what did he do? What's the word took for? The word took comes to say that he, Korach, took himself aside. In other words, he distanced himself. He distanced himself from Moses and Aaron. He's distanced himself from essentially the Jewish people. Maybe he also distanced himself from God. But if we look even deeper, and this is where Chassidut comes in, there's another opinion. One of the important authors, or not so much author as much as commentator, was Onkelos. Onkelos lived approximately from the year 35 in the Common Era to 120 in the Common Era. He was Roman and an aristocrat. His mother was Hadrian's sister. Hadrian was the Roman emperor. And he, Onkelos, converted. And he translated the Torah into Aramaic, which is the spoken language at that time, even more than Roman, apparently. As far as I know, this is the second attempt at translating the Torah into a different language. The first was into Greek, what's called the Septuagint, I think it's called, pronounced. But that was in the 3rd century before the Common Era. This, as we said, is in the 1st century to the 2nd century of the Common Era. Onkelos translated it to Aramaic, but it's more than a literal translation. He actually has a commentary woven in to his translation. And how does Onkelos translate Vayikach Korach? V'yitpaleg. Paleg means divided, separated. So that it's not a matter so much of, as Rashi says, distancing himself, but essentially that Korach divided, caused a division within Am Yisrael, made a separation between parts of Am Yisrael. And with this as a background, we can look a little bit into what Judaism is all about. In Jewish thought, it's true that we have priests, Kohanim. It's a holy office. In a way, it's separated from worldly affairs. They were provided by the rest of Am Yisrael. They provided food. They were provided the ability to sit in the sanctuary and serve God. It was they who made the sacrifices, made the offerings. But critically, they remained part of the Jewish nation. They were not separated from it. They were part of the Jewish nation. And their purpose was to influence, to motivate, to draw the Jewish nation up to a higher spiritual level, not to be separated, but to be part of the Jewish people. And if we look at Aaron, says in the Ethics of the Father, Aaron loved peace. He did everything to draw people closer one to another, especially between husband and wife. And Aaron, as the high priest, embodies the whole idea of what priesthood is, not something separated from the Jewish nation, but something part and parcel of the Jewish nation. Excuse me 1 minute. So that in essence, the holy and the secular are not two separate things, but they are part of one. Now, Korach didn't see it this way. Korach, when we say divided, separated, he saw the priesthood as being something separate, only holy, only serving Hashem. The rest of Am Yisrael, it's like, I don't want to be too severe, kind of second-class citizens, but they have their duty. What's their duty? To be in the physical, practical world. And this was in Korach's shortcoming. He saw the difference between the secular and the holy, between the priesthood and the rest of Am Yisrael, as being a division. Now, the idea of division is critical to understanding the deeper meaning. Where have we seen this before? And this is where Chassidut comes in. According to the Zohar, the second day of creation, way back then, in the second day, it says, God said, let there be a sky in the midst of the water, and it will divide between the water and water, between the water of the atmosphere and the water of the oceans. So God positioned the sky and divided the water below the sky and the water above the sky. In other words, the second day of creation was a day of division. Now, interestingly, each day, as God completed the part of creation for that day, it says, and God saw that it was good. Then evening and morning, and so on and so forth. Except for the second day. The second day doesn't mention that God saw it was good. Why? Because it was a day of division. But on the third day, God said, let the water below the heaven be gathered to one place, which is the oceans, so dry land should be seen. And so it was. God called the dry land earth, and he called the gathering of the seas, the water, seas. According to the Zohar, on the third day, the division was healed. It became one. Creation became one. The parts of creation became one. And there, it not only says God saw that it was good, but it mentions it twice that God said it was good. To understand what this division is, I'd like to read one sentence, two sentences actually, from this book. I think the rabbi has it in the library in the Chabad house. It's Torah Studies by Rabbi Jonathan Zaks, Zichron Livracha. Explains it in a very lucid and exact and understandable way. He writes like this. Thus, we learn that in the divine scheme, there has to be a division between things of heaven and those of earth, but that its consummation is in their reuniting. And just as on the third day, so too in the third millennium, Torah was given to bring together heaven and earth, God descending and Israel ascending to union. So we see the whole idea behind creation is not one of separation, but one of unification. And this is what Judaism demands from us. Judaism demands that both heaven and earth, the spiritual and the secular, the holy and the secular becomes one. It's one creation, it's one entity. This is the idea, even though we have a dichotomy, this is the idea behind this kind of division. And when is the division fulfilled in God's scheme? When it becomes unified. Okay, now with all this as a background, we can have a certain approach to what we discussed at the beginning, good and evil. To understand what good and evil is, I'd like to bring in a mythology. I think you said darkness. Darkness used to be considered just an absence of light. I understand that today there are some scientists who say that darkness is not an absence of light. It's an entity by itself. It's something that exists. I don't know exactly how. Maybe one day I'll be a scientist and I can understand how, but at the moment, I don't. The same thing with evil. Evil, by some definitions, is an absence or lack of goodness. The brothers will say that evil is an entity by itself. And this leads to something, an idea of what is good, what is evil, how do we decide? So there's a suggestion, what's called moral relativism. What is moral relativism? Another book. This is Taught a Meaningful Life, was written, I think, over 20 years ago by Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Don't know if the rabbi has it in his library. A lot of very interesting ideas that can really fulfill or fill our lives. And he writes like this: to lead a truthful and meaningful life, we must define good and evil. And we must have an absolute value system that guides our conduct. Otherwise, our standards remain arbitrary. We may even wonder why we should bother to dedicate our lives to the pursuit of goodness. That sentence is so profound that with your permission, I'd like to read it again. We may even wonder why we should bother to dedicate our lives to the pursuit of goodness. If there's no absolute goodness, why bother? When we teach our children right from wrong, we must be able to tell them and ourselves why such a distinction is necessary and absolute. Okay, so now we come to good and evil itself. Good, as he suggests a little bit further on, essentially is that which is constructive. Evil is that which is destructive. Does that make it an entity? Maybe, I don't know. But essentially we have two opposing forces, one of good, the other of evil. But they both come from the one God who in essence and is ultimately good. So through goodness, the result is a unity of both. That means, in other words, does evil disappear or become good? I don't know. But through goodness, we can negate evil. How is that accomplished? That is something that we've been struggling with for ages. When will it be accomplished? When it's accomplished, then we will have reached the full and final redemption, in which case there'll be only goodness. There won't be any evil. And I have written down here, like on the third day of creation, the division is thus healed. The two opposite forces become one. And in that case, when there is no evil, when it's either negated by or absorbed by goodness, then it will be that God saw that it was good. And so that's the idea of good and evil, the divide and conquer. Good and evil are divided. How do we conquer it? Not necessarily by destroying, by fighting against it. Sometimes we have to. But by unifying by making it one unified. I don't know what the word is in English. One unified existence, one unified substance, one unified idea.
Force.
Reality, that's the word. One unified reality of only goodness without evil. And so with that idea of good and only good, we see that the idea of Korach mentioning this this portion after somebody evil actually has good in it. And in that sense, it's especially appropriate that it should be the Shabbat that we celebrate, that we recognize the Yahrzeit of the Rebbe, who throughout his lifetime and throughout all of that he did, exemplifies the idea and the existence, the reality of goodness. We have a few minutes left. I'd like to tell one story. There's so many stories about the Rebbe, but there's one that, for me, encapsulates the Rebbe's entire approach and existence. I have a friend who, the Rebbe used to, for a number of years, would on Sunday mornings and other occasions, give out dollars. I don't have it right here with me, but I was privileged to receive a number of those dollars. In the later years, and I experienced it firsthand, there would be two lines, one for men, one for women. Each one would extend a mile or more. The Rebbe would give out dollars for 6, 7, even 8 hours in order to enable everybody to pass. But in the first few weeks, before it became well known, the line started not outside on Eastern Parkway, but downstairs at 770. The Rebbe would stand by his office, and there would be a line downstairs. The first time that I received the Rebbe, I was downstairs. Anyway, I have a friend who was downstairs waiting for the line to go. The line didn't begin, and the line began moving. He decided that he'll utilize that opportunity and begin davening, say the morning prayers. So he was with a tefillin, talit and tefillin, and the line began moving. And while the davening, the line began moving. And he said, what should I do? Should I stop in the middle of the davening or continue? He decided, no, I'm going to continue. And whatever will be. Well, sure enough, by the time he finished, the line had completed it. But he went outside afterwards, met his wife, and he was embarrassed to tell them. They came all this way from Israel to get a dollar from the Rebbe, and he missed it. So he didn't say anything to his wife. He met his wife, and as they're walking, the Rebbe says, no, very strange. I don't know why, but the Rebbe gave me $2. Why do I say the encapsulate? Because as attached as we are to the Rebbe, as much as we depend and receive support and inspiration and motivation and guidance from the Rebbe, but the Rebbe is not instead of God. And when this friend decided that he's going to finish his morning prayers, even in the expense, in quotation, expense, of not passing the Rebbe and getting the dollar, the Rebbe said that is correct. The Jew is connected to God. The Rebbe can serve as a conduit, as a guidance, but ultimately, it's God. And of all the stories, and you hear so many fantastic, it's miraculous things, but for me, that encapsulates the Rebbe. And that is the ultimate of combining good and evil to be one reality of good by itself. So if anybody has any questions, comments, I'd be very happy to hear, try to answer.
Thank you, Rabbi, and stay safe. We're all praying for you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining. that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should watch over all of Am Yisrael, and we say Yishamu B'Sorot Tovot. We should only hear good tidings, and pray that that God directs all of us in the right path, and especially those whose decisions are so monumental, are so they had such an impact on so many people, that God should give them the strength and the wisdom to do the right thing. And everybody should stay well and healthy. And as I said, B'Sorot Tovot L'Kol Am Yisrael. Thank you for joining, and hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
All the best.
If you're still there, Rabbi, I have a quick
Yes.
question.
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier, the darkness and light, and you had mentioned something about how darkness is there, but you can't prove it or something like that. I can't remember exactly what you said, but it made me think of I think it's about 10 years ago, they discovered scientifically what's referred to as dark energy or dark matter.
Mhm.
It can't be, they can't see it, right? They've been able to infer it or deduce it based on other things. And
Right.
so I think I always enjoy when I see, because religion being super rational, I always enjoy it when I see science essentially supporting in a way maybe that doesn't even intend, supporting the religious concepts or the concepts of super rational things we can't know, and so forth. So anyway, I just find that interesting.
No, I always thought that, and I'd heard that darkness is simply an absence of light. And I said that once, actually, I think it was in Tallahassee, and somebody from the university, I don't remember, maybe one of the professors said, no, today they consider darkness to be an entity that really exists as, in a way, like matter. Up until now, anything that exists physically, we called matter. I don't know if you think how light fits in. I don't understand light, so I don't understand darkness. But the idea is, as you say, that a religion that tries to be separate from the world is going to have a lot of problems. But Judaism is within the world. And interesting, the Rebbe said once that science is trying to find, and I know that Einstein spent years trying to find one formula that would be applicable or understand they said there are 4 different forces, and I know one is magnetism. I don't know what the other 3 was. And he said, and the Rebbe said, when science is going to one day find that formula, why not just accept it now and call it God? And so it's exactly what you say. There is an existence. It's a God-given existence. God gives us the ability, the power, the insight. It gives the life force to the world. And you know what? I'll tell you, it's amazing when you think about the size of the universe. Now a very powerful telescope that was in a satellite or something discovered another million or millions, billions, I don't know, of galaxies. Think about DNA. How much in one person? How much goes into one person? The idea, things are so complex, so that it's just, you know what? It's mind-boggling. And I'll finish with a story. I was a field medic in the Army. And every year we had, how to say, practice the, I'm looking for the word. So,
Was it medical?
medical, we went through practice.
Emergency.
And I said once to the doctor, I said, you're a surgeon. Have you ever operated and found something that doesn't belong there, or something that's missing, or something's in the wrong place? Everything's so cool. How can you do that and say that it's all by chance? And he said, you know what? You're right. I don't think it changed his life, but at least he admitted that I was right. And so so you're right in that sense. As we get more and more, I read the other day that scientists discovered something now in Antarctica, radio waves or something like that. They're not supposed to be there, and they can't explain it. There's so much that we can't explain. That, like the Rebbe said, let's beat the scientists. Let's get there before them. We'll just call it God.
I'll take, if you just have 30 more seconds. So my favorite little piece
Yes.
is in the same lines is, so what you were referring to earlier about Einstein is what's referred to as the unified field theory.
Okay.
And it's the four forces, as you mentioned. And in particular, the divide that they can't seem to unify is at the quantum level, quantum mechanics. This is at the very tiniest level of electrons and protons and neutrons.
Okay.
And there's something called the Heisenberg principle. And the Heisenberg principle says that at the very smallest level, we can know the vector of a particle. We can know where it's headed. And we can also know its velocity. What we cannot know, or we can know where it is, but we cannot know both at the same time. In other words, science has said there's a scientific law, a veil that we cannot pierce, where things happen and we cannot know what happens by physical law. We've decided that. And to me, that's just like saying, there's a part of the universe that we can't understand, and we just have to accept that as faith. And to your point, why not simply accept that as being, God?
Right. Very good. Very good point. Okay. We're a little bit over time. Thank
Yeah,
you for
sorry.
joining. Thank you and hope to see you next time in Tallahassee.
Yes, sir. Thank
Don't
you.
know
Stay
when, but
safe.
sometime.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Take care.
Stay safe.
Keep well, everyone. All the best. Bye.
Bye.